A disastrous day in the Critérium du Dauphiné 2024, Stage 5 here in Saint-Priest, and it was a stage that was neutralized. No winner was announced today. We didn't have a sprint to the finish. Instead, we had a massive crash around about 22 kilometers out that came after several other crashes, and we're going to get into all those details, but I can tell you right now, Primoz Roglic came down, Remco Evenepoel came down, Juan Ayuso came down, and he looks worse out of those, and Steven Kruijswijk and Dylan Van Baarle, both from Team Visma-Leasebike, went to the hospital. In total, there were 30 to 50 riders that all fell on this last descent of the day. Slick roads coming here where it's now sunny. Unfortunately, the riders had this rainy condition. Everyone seemed to hit the brakes, and like dominoes, everyone came down. Let's back it all the way back to the start. I want to briefly talk about what happened in the race before this disastrous moment. We had an escape of two riders that was joined by a third. Three riders were free. Lebert was in there with the Mountains jersey, Bayer from Alpecin, and Holter from Team Uno X. Those three would dominate the day up front, and it seemed that the sprinters team were happy to let that escape go. Behind, we saw Lidl Trek for Mats Pedersen and the team of Decathlon AG2R La Mondiale of Team Sam Bennett controlling the race. Things really started to get dicey. We saw up front with Holter having a crash, having to chase back on. He chased for like 10 kilometers to join the other two, got back on. The road conditions were wet. Another crash, 38 kilometers to go. That one involved American Nilsson Palace from EF Education. That crash was followed by another one, and that was the disastrous one. Right around 21.5 kilometers to go. The gap to the front two at that point, Holter was no longer there, was at 26 seconds or so. Mark it on your clocks, it was 2:10 p.m. Yeah, the race was early today because of the tennis tournament up in Paris. Roland Garros also today. We're marking the 80th anniversary of D-Day. President Joe Biden, of course, is here in France. Unfortunately for the race, massive crash. We never saw quite what happened, the first riders to come down, but we saw the aftermath, the shot from behind. Riders racing on what looked like to be icy roads on the descent of the final climb. Rider after rider must have been hitting the brakes, everybody sliding out on the roads, and then we saw the moment. We saw Primoz Roglic up there on the side of the road with his teammates around him, and then the camera flashed over to Remco Evenepoel, race leader in the yellow jersey, sitting on the side of the road, and quite quickly the race was neutralized. Remember, this is just over 2 months after the Tour of the Basque Country crash that involved Remco, Primoz Roglic, and Jonas Vingegaard. And here are Remco and Primoz Roglic making their race return in this race, and they're crashing again. Thankfully, the early assessments are that they are okay, but it took a long time for those guys to get up, and I think also they were taking their time because they had heard that the race was neutralized. The race was taking a moment to figure out what it was going to do. The race organizer had stopped, also the front two riders. Everybody decided, well, it was best just to call it there. No rider, no sprint. They weren't going to allow the sprinters to go on and maybe neutralize the GC. And the official reasoning is that, well, there simply wasn't enough ambulances in case there was another crash in those final kilometers. We saw the images of Kruijswijk being loaded into the ambulance, and later I spoke with the Visma DS, Grisha Nierman, who confirmed that also Dylan Van Baarle went to the hospital as well. We do know that up front, Matteo Jorgensen, Sepp Kuss, and Tish Benoot from that team, and also from Team Lidl Trek, Giulio Ciccone and Carlos Verona, they were okay because they were right up there in front and they were looking back to see what happened. We saw the images of the two escapees and they were looking back to see what happened. Everybody was getting the information through their radio. And so the organizer decided, well, there's not enough ambulances, we can't go on. And they called it. Also, the riders were getting cold there, waiting on the side of the road. It was still raining, even though now it's quite sunny here at the finish line. Race was calmed, neutralized, and the riders ride the final 20 kilometers back here to town. We're able to speak to the riders, get some images of the injuries. Spoke with Derek G. He came down, he looks okay, and he said it was just one of those things, everybody's locking up their brakes. Primoz Roglic, he fell on his shoulder, not the one that he hurt in the Tour of the Basque Country crash, but he fell on his shoulder that was injured a couple years ago, so he's going to have to see how it is overnight. Remco Evenepoel, I saw blood on his right leg. Also, he said he fell on his right side, on his hip there, and he said that he did a somersault. He thought he was going to save himself, but he finally did crash, did a somersault, and landed on his head. looked okay. We were able to speak with him, and he also did interviews, bless him, Remco Evenepoel, did interviews in French, English, and then Dutch. Also spoke with some of the other riders. DS from Team Bor Hansgrohe, Rolf Aldag, who spoke about the crash. He was right there in the moment with Primoz Roglic to confirm everything was okay, and thankfully so. Also with Vlasov, Jai Hindley did come down. Those riders were able to continue. A lot of riders were saying they hadn't seen anything like this ever. Well, we have to look back to the Tour of Basque Country to see something similar, but then even that day, not as many riders came down. Even if that day, early assessments here today on the ground, but even if that day, it seemed that the riders were worse off with fewer riders coming down. And then looking further back, I can remember some massive crashes in cycling, but it's a shame that it's happened here. And speaking with Remco Evenepoel, I asked that everything's just heightened with the Tour de France 23 days away, and he seemed to say, yes, there's more tension in the air and everything. Also, that other crash is fresh in his mind. And he said, oh, not again, when he crashed. And thinking back to his Tour of Basque Country crash on April 4th, but here he is on the ground, having to recover, get back up. All the riders going to be checked out tonight. Also, Mads Pedersen came down. It's just a day to forget, and also an unfortunate day for those sprinters hoping to get the second opportunity in the 2024 Critérium du Dauphiné to have a sprint, and those escape riders to get a chance to attack and escape again. It just didn't happen. Instead, we turned the page after reviewing all those images, and you're seeing them now, horrific images, but we must show those images so everyone understands what happened, so you get a clear idea of what happened in the day. We don't like showing these images, but it helps us all understand what happened so we can assess, and also as fans of cycling, know the struggle that these riders have to go through to continue on racing day after day. This is only an 8-day stage race, but the Tour de France, they're racing 21 days. Upcoming in this 2024 Critérium du Dauphiné, everyone's going to reset tonight, rest, even on those crashes, on those road rashes. They're going to try to recover, get some hopefully good night's sleep, because we have 3 summit finishes in a row, all 3 going up to around 1,400, 1,600 meters, and all 3 of those final climbs in each day are steep, like Giro d'Italia steep type of climbs. But today, here in Saint-Priest, the race takes a calm, deep breath and remembers those riders who crashed today, and sends our well wishes out to everyone who's in the hospital getting checks in the 2024 Critérium du Dauphiné.